Welcome on in, ladies and gentlemen, to episode number 12 of Let's Go Racing with David Starr. Tyler Jones here with you. So glad to have you with us today. Coming up on today's show, we're going to look back at the Daytona 500, also look ahead to the Daytona road course race, and we're going to meet David's new team owner, Carl Long. All that and more in just a bit. We bring in David Starr right now. David, appreciate the time as always. An exciting week for you, I imagine, as you're gearing up for your season debut coming up this weekend.
Yeah, no doubt about it, man. I'm here at the shop at MBM Motorsports and, looking forward to getting our season cranked up. Our season, we missed Daytona this past weekend, but it was fun being there. Carl had 3 cars in the Xfinity Series race and then almost got 2 of his Cup cars into the Daytona 500, but it was it was a busy weekend. Had 4 or 5 of our sponsors there, entertained them. Not being in the race car didn't slow me down from the busy standpoint, but it was a fun, exciting weekend. The racing was awesome, and look forward to going back to Daytona and kicking off our season on the road course.
Dominic Oregon from the RacingExperts.com is here. Dominic, how we doing, man?
Great, man. It's just trying to stay warm here in New Mexico. We got a lot of snow over the weekend, and part of the snow that hit back home for David as well. We got a lot of snow and a lot of temperatures below zero, so we're just trying to stay warm. And man, I got to say, David, the lighting there, it looks like they shut the lights on you at the shop. You're that dedicated. You're still there at the shop this late at night.
Well, y'all see Carl on the screen there. Carl's usually here pretty dang late every night, and his right-hand guy Skippy was just here. And hey, man, I'm not back home in Texas. I came from Daytona, came back over here to Statesville, North Carolina, where the shop's at. And man, the guys were getting after it hard today. They were working hard, and they shut it down about an hour ago and hour and a half ago. And I said, hey guys, can I stay and do the podcast? And they said, heck yeah. So all the lights are shut off, and they got me hooked up. That's for sure.
Awesome.
We did leave the heat on for him, though, so he wouldn't freeze.
Well, there you go. That's a good thing.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. The heat is on. But we lost Tyler real quick. Bear with us, guys.
Oh, Tyler's okay. So I guess I'm taking the reins here for a few minutes. So we'll go ahead and introduce Carl here. David, why don't you take the lead here and tell us a little bit about Carl and give us a grand introduction.
Well, man, hey, Carl Long's been a great friend of mine for many years. I've been fortunately enough to have been involved with this cool sport of NASCAR racing for 24 years, and Carl's was in it a lot longer than I have been. But what a great guy, great race car driver. Just been involved in it for a long time, and not only is he a good friend, he's now my team owner. You know what I mean? So, hey, Carl, welcome to our podcast, buddy.
I'm glad to be here with you, David.
So, man, Carl, just, tell all the folks we love bringing on guests, and, it's always really cool to hear everybody's story. And, man, we really get deep with people. We had Mike Skinner on not too long ago and Jeff Bodine, and, man, we always take it back to the beginning, and tell everybody how you, how racing started for you. Was your dad involved in it? How did that come to be,
Well, my dad was involved in racing, I guess, back in the early 70s, and he raced in the NASCAR Baby Grand Series. And he's a Volkswagen mechanic, and when he first started racing, they ran the Volkswagen Beetle in the Dash Series, as it developed to be in. And so I was just happy to go with him to the racetrack, and I'd jump in the car and hold the brake when they'd roll it off the trailer. And that's probably 6-7 years old back then. And so I remember going to North Wilkesboro and Charlotte and places that was close to North Carolina. He would let me go. We'd leave on a Saturday morning and race late Saturday afternoon and come back. So I guess back in 1983, I just turned old enough to drive, and they hadn't raced the Beetles anymore. And my dad and his 2 brothers, my dad's name was Horace, and his brothers Lonnie and Everett, they all three had Volkswagen Beetles, and Dad had moved on and had a Mercury Capri that he had run in the Dash Series. And when they reopened Orange County Speedway in Rougemont, we started the mini stock class, and a couple other friends that we knew built a couple of cars. And so I started it racing, and I was 15, but I had my driver's permit. Well, they didn't have all of this internet stuff like they do now. So Dad co-signed for me, and I started racing at 15. And the next year I was 16 that year, but the next year when my real license come through, I was 16 again. And so it developed, and we met a lot of people there. I mean, the very first car I drove as a Volkswagen Beetle in mini stock, I moved over the next year and drove one of our other cars that my dad had built. And Ward Burton drove the car that I first started in. And so
Ward Burton, our Daytona 500 champion, Ward Burton, had been in NASCAR. Wow. Drove one of your cars.
My dad was helping. He was really good at electrical and wiring on the cars, and he had went over to South Boston and helped wire up a car and do some stuff for Jeff Burton. And John and Ward kind of showed up, and he'd been busy out hunting and trapping and not really doing a whole lot of racing stuff. And he told his dad if he was going to let Jeff race, that he wanted to race. And my dad was just sitting there and said, well, hell, I got a Volkswagen if you want to drive it. So Ward come down, and I mounted his seat up for him, and had to move it a little closer to the steering wheel. And I don't know, he got hung up with a Pinto at South. We used to draw for starting positions.
Yeah.
And I think he was like third or fourth in it or somewhere or another. And the first or second lap, him and the guy got together and knocked the tie rods off of it. Something bent the front end, and Ward went into turn one and buried it about windshield deep into the fence with the right front. And then the next race, he'd moved on over and went to racing in a street stock class up there. And as he moved up, and his dad helped him, which they had a lot of financial resources that we didn't. Sure. I finally made it to street stock, and Ward always gave me these tires and all of the takeoffs. And he and I still remain pretty good friends. And he sees my dad at the track. He comes and yells at him, which Dad hadn't been able to go much with the COVID stuff. But right. But he's still listed as a team owner of our Cup car number 66. And so
that's pretty cool, Carl. Heck, I can't wait to see Ward Burton. I never knew that you kind of helped him. I mean, that he drove a Carl Long car for his first race, and that was kind of interesting. But not only that, it was a Beetle. It was a bug race car.
Yeah, we have some photos. I'll see if I have to get one of my buddies to dig it up, or either my dad might have it. But the guy that he tangled up with the Pinto actually let Ward borrow his backup driver uniform. So that boy's name was Clifton Lee. He borrowed Clifton's suit because Ward probably won't, but he still ain't big as nothing back then. But he's probably $125, about 5'3", 5'4". And I was real skinny back then, but I was too tall, and I didn't have but one uniform, so I couldn't let Ward borrow mine.
That's funny, Carl. But it's amazing, a 6-year-old kid going to the racetrack with your dad, jumping in the race car, backing it off the trailer. And man, you fast forward all these years, and what Carl Long's done in NASCAR is really amazing, what you've done in your career. And not only have you driven in the NASCAR Camp World Truck Series, the Busch Series, Xfinity Series now, but all the Winston Cup starts you have, and it's been amazing. Now a big time team owner, so man, I tell you what, it's come a long way since a kid that was 6 years old that loved backing off his dad's race car off the trailer. That's pretty cool. And helping Ward Burton get a start. That's pretty cool. I never knew that story.
Yeah. We've been around a lot of them. My toughest weekly competition when I was running late models that moved on was racing against the Saddlers, Hermie and Elliott, and then even like right now, one of the guys that's the same age that you and I are, David, is a guy named Ronald Hill. His dad was a multiple track champion, And Ronald's daughter grew up, and now she's married to Quinn Huff. And,
oh, wow.
Yep, and I get Ronald does have CDLs, and he told me to help me drive. So if you see some guy at the racetrack with cowboy boots and a cap on, it might be Quinn Huff's daddy-in-law.
That's man, awesome. That part of the country where y'all grew up at, Carl, just is so rich with a lot of NASCAR history. A lot of people come from that part of the country, have made it in the sport yourselves. Obviously, the Sadlers and the Burtons, man, that's pretty cool. So, man, you're racing street stocks, and let our listeners know, when you're backing off that race car off your dad's trailer at 6 years old, I mean, was that a goal? Was that your dream to be a NASCAR driver, make a living racing, or what? How did all that happen? And was that something was that your dream since you were a kid, or you just kind of fell into it? How did all that work?
No, it was always my dream. When you used to have those carpets that would be at the door that was like in little circles, and you have another circle, and the circles would get bigger and bigger. Well, I used to have my Hot Wheels on there, and I always was going to win the race. I'd bump them out, wreck them. But I had so many of them, you couldn't race them at one time. But back then, they didn't have the racing champions and the collectibles. So I painted mine. I had all my Hot Wheels. I'd paint them up with the 15 on. I think I can probably dig them out for some of your future stuff if Dad would bring them back.
That's
David Pearson, Neil Bonnet, Richard Petty, and
man, that's pretty cool. Nothing really changed for those Hot Wheel days in them circles, because man, you beat and banged and moved some people out of the way, and so how you played with those Hot Wheels kind of equated how you raced in NASCAR, man. So that's pretty cool.
Well, I guess that would probably answer the question. When your aunts and uncles or something come over for a holiday and they didn't pay no attention and they just stepped on your car and squished it and broke the wheels off of it, I guess that's kind of what's happened to me. I've been squished a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's like I said, there's a lot of history, and probably the one that I've raced the closest with the most was Scott Riggs. Scott had a Pinto and we had a Volkswagen, and my dad helped do some machine work and stuff for them, and they did body work for us. And his wife Jay, I got her working at one of the same places that I was working at over in Durham. And so Scott and I grew up and shared a lot of stuff together. And he went out and ran a truck race. I reckon it was at IRP that they went and did, and he finished like 15th or 9th or something, and he had a really good weekend, which was the same weekend that I had qualified for the 600 at Charlotte. And he's like, hell, didn't anybody talk about me? All I could talk about was Carl Long, Carl and putting Darrell Waltrip in the car.
Well, man, that was a big deal, man. I mean, making the Coca-Cola 600 and doing that kind of stuff. I mean, you're talking about some prestigious races. I mean, the Coca-Cola 600 is a pretty big deal. I know Scott Riggs, finishing 15th or 9th or 10th was a big deal for him. But when you're talking NASCAR Cup racing, the Coca-Cola 600 don't get much better than that, So I think it both worked out for both of you guys, So that's pretty cool, And Scott did he did well in our sport, and man, he had a lot of success, and I think he retired a while back. And man, you've been doing this a long time. Tell us a little bit about when you jumped from late models or whatever it is you were racing, and how you made it to NASCAR, how all that worked out, and who was responsible for that.
Well, I learned, it took me 6 years from the time I was 15 years old. It took me 6 years to figure out how to get out of a mini stock car with a Volkswagen motor behind me. And I had won the championship. I'd won several things, and I wanted to move up. And at the same time, I would leave Roxborough, North Carolina, and I would drive to Raleigh. And I went to school at Wake Technical College, and I was trying to learn to be a CNC machinist and whatever I could. I went there trying to be I think they had a class that was something how to build computers, and I kept falling asleep in the class, and that didn't really work out too good for me. So I moved over to something that I knew a little more about with my hands and in a machine shop setting. And so when I drive back from school, and I'd stop in Durham because by the time I would get home to Roxborough, which is an hour and a half away, the dinner rush was over, and there won't but about 15 people in my hometown anyway, so they didn't already eat. And at least we'd stop in Durham, and I'd make a little money and deliver pizzas for a few hours. And a guy named Dan Shefty that owned the restaurants, the Domino's Pizzas, he came to me and wanted me to go back to my hometown and take over the store that they had built there because they just didn't have anybody that fit in that little town that I was from. And
Right.
I told Dan that delivering pizzas and running a store wasn't what I had on my menu. My plan was to go racing. So Dan and I come to a conclusion that he would help sponsor me go racing if I would turn away one racetrack so that I could manage his store on one weekend and race the other weekend. And it just so happened that Mason Day owned South Boston and Orange County, and he alternated weekends. So I took him up on it. And back then he wrote us a $10,000 check with Domino's Pizza sponsoring me to run my late model car. Well, I took that $10,000 check, and I didn't have a car. All I had was a Volkswagen. So I went to a couple of the premium teams around my little area, and oh no, man, that's good money, but you need about 30,000, if you're gonna drive my car, because got this guy. And I was just like on and on. I couldn't believe these people all wanted. Hell, I had one of the biggest sponsors was in the neighborhood, and they wanted more money. You just don't know how to drive a late model car because you've been running a Volkswagen. Well, hell, I've been doing it for 6 years.
Yeah.
I was ready to do something. So my grandfather helped me get a loan, and I was, like I said, managing the pizza store, lived at home, so I didn't have a whole lot of other expenses other than my race car. And
Right.
So we went and I borrowed the money and bought a car, and my girlfriend's dad, his brother-in-law was working for Jack Tant, building engines for Jack Tant Racing. And his name was Doug Triplett. And Doug, he still right now works over at Joey Arrington's building engines.
Right.
And so Doug built me a street stock motor, and Tom Pass, my future father-in-law, he paid for the engine for Doug. So I had $10,000, a brand new Jack Tant motor that somebody else paid for, and still wouldn't nobody let me drive their damn car.
Wow.
So I bought one on my own, and we went to the track, and at Orange County, I think I sat on a pole a couple of times, and but about 10 laps in it was pushing, and I wound up finishing 5th or 6th. It wouldn't turn. I didn't know that much about it. That's the first time I had a motor in the front of me. So,
oh heck.
And so Doug helped me over that winter, and we rebuilt the car, and we did it at a place. There's a guy named Stan Cruz that used to race a lot, and we rebuilt the car down there, and we found out that the clip was broke and it was flexing, and that's why the thing
Wouldn't turn.
Yeah, it was just tight. So we fixed that part, welded it up, and put a new body on it, and I had took my store in the pizza stuff, and I took it from doing about $3,500 a week in sales to doing over $10,000 a week in sales, and
wow,
tripled the stuff, and actually won manager of the year for that region. And
man, that's amazing, Carl. The amazing thing is, I mean, it just goes to show you. I love hearing your story, man. Just because and I didn't know any of this, but it just goes to show you, people don't realize what you do to try to make it in racing and to drive a race car. Heck, you were managing a pizza store and delivering pizzas, dude. I never knew that, man, and that's amazing.
Yeah, I did several competitions. I was, like I said, I won some of the speed awards when we was making it, and every year during Super Bowl Sunday they would send us over to the UNC. Either at Duke or Chapel Hill at UNC at one of the college campuses, because Super Bowl Sunday was the biggest day of the year for pizza delivery. And
Right.
there was I had set the record in my Durham store before I took over as a manager. I think I delivered 121 pizzas one night, something like $1,100, and it was it set for a while, and I still know some of them guys. And even when we go to Charlotte, they used to have the pizza concession stand, which now is the Bojangles concession stand, the infield at Charlotte.
Right.
And Mac Patterson was a franchisee that owned it, and I knew him through Dan. And he used to always, we never had to pay for a pizza at Charlotte, so I could feed the guys in the infield.
Man, amazing, man, amazing.
So you were the Domino's guy well before Denny Hamlin was, and before he started showing Domino's in his PJs.
That is correct. I was in a bad position because we had just got to the situation where we had rebuilt the car, went to racing, running the store for that year, and Tom Monahan, who was the founder and owner of Domino's Pizza, Ari Lyondike won the Indianapolis 500 in a Domino's Pizza car. I had Domino's Pizza sponsorship, and
Wow.
they came back, and like I said, that was through Dan Shefty, and Domino's came out and said, we are no longer sponsoring anything to do with fast driving because it's 30 minutes or $3 off. It used to be 30 minutes or it was free. But then he said, we're just getting killed out here from lawsuits. If you got a Domino's Pizza uniform on, you are a crazy driver, and they're getting rid of you. And they're suing them. So they dropped all advertisement in racing. And I know that Michael Waltrip had to have it. And my car number was 30. I had 30 minutes or less. It was 30, and then I had minutes or less on the side of it.
Man, that's pretty cool, Carl. So your car number was 30.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's amazing. That was 30 minutes or less. And I got a wall full of photos that's upstairs, but
man, that's pretty cool. So man, unbelievable, man. Carl Long, the pizza man, I never knew that, man. That is cool. So tell the listener, I mean, how do you get from 30 minutes or less late model racing, street stock racing? How did Carl Long become Carl Long, the NASCAR driver? You know what I mean?
Well, after we rebuilt the car, I won several races that year. I won the championship. I don't think we ever scratched the car up, and I won the championship at Orange County. And then we went to the second year, but I partied with Domino's after that because they wasn't going to be no future. They wasn't going to sponsor, and it kind of ended. They offered me the store. They wanted me to buy it,
right,
and own it, but I had no interest in owning a store. I wanted to race.
Absolutely.
And so because I didn't buy it, they sold it to another guy that was a part of the company, and he didn't give a shit about racing. Well, that's supposed to be the right word.
No, you're all right. You're all right.
So he didn't care about racing. He wanted me to be there every Saturday night, every Sunday night, and Friday night. And I just quit and picked up a new position. And I ran the second year. We had a few more crashes, and I wound up finishing second in the points. I didn't win that one. And,
right.
But at that time, now these people that didn't want me to drive and didn't care much about what I could do, I built that up, and there was a race car driver named Ray Kirby that was one of our local guys. He was really best friends with Doug that was building my engines, and my current wife's uncle at that time. And
right.
So they helped me get into that situation. And I guess the first year that I drove it, I won in my third race out, and ran in the front, and just, I had the Burtons, and if you name it, Michael Rich was some of them that came there, Dennis Setzer, a lot of really good racers. Where it was at the racetrack, Orange County and South Boston, with some of the premium drivers in the Southeast, and we were able to win, right out of the box with it. And then that probably was a problem, because as we started winning, we kept trying to get better. And then we kept getting slower and slower. We kept doing stuff.
Funny how that works at times.
Huh?
Well, man, you race with some heavy hitters, man. Dennis Setzer, Elliott Sadler, and freaking the Burtons, man. I mean, hey, just those guys right there. You look at the record, you look in the record books and see what those guys have done in NASCAR. So you had some steep competition back in those days.
Yeah, Jay Fogelman has a son, Tate, that's racing now. Jay and I are the same age, and we raced against each other each week. And we might have been ran into each other a couple of times. And I seen somebody put the list out not long ago on one of the Orange County Facebook pages, and you look back and you go, wow, there's a lot of people that moved over. Rodney Childress used to race with us.
Wow, so, Rodney Childress. Is Rodney Childress, and correct me if I'm wrong, Carl. Well, that's Kevin Harvick's crew chief, isn't it?
That's correct.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, so, amazing.
And then when we go to the big events, Dale Jr. and Kerry and Kelly, they would kind of show up in their Western Steer cars. And I got a photo at Martinsville where I'm the guy with the trophy from one of the qualifying races. I never qualified in the top 20, and then I always had in the race. So, but I was there, and Frank Daney, who spotted for me all of last year for one of my teams, I got kicked out of a race and got suspended. So I had Frankie come drive my car for me when they wouldn't let me do it. And so we go back. Chris Rice.
Yeah.
Now Chris Rice that runs Colic Motorsports now. When I got my late model car, after I'd moved up from street stock, this car that Ray Kirby and them helped me get was the very first car that his dad and his uncle, his dad is Alan Rice and his uncle Earl, Jeff Burton, they were keeping all of Jeff's cars up and going in late model. Well, Jeff had moved on and moved up to Bush.
Okay.
So they had all the equipment left over. And so they started a late model stock chassis shop where they were building race cars. And Ray was the first person to buy the car, and they had just started on it at the end of the season. And then, like I said, Ray had to get out of the car, and he helped me get in it. And so I didn't really know how to set the bump steer on my car when I was working on it. So I drove over halfway between Roxborough and South Boston. There was a little town called Cluster Springs.
Okay.
And that's where Chris Rice lives. And he's 14 years old, and he can't drive, but his dad told me he knowed how to set up bump steer. So I drove over there and picked up Chris and brought him back to the house, and me and him set the bump steer at my shop. And then I carried him back to South Boston, and
wow, Carl. And
so,
look what he's done since then, man. Amazing,
He picked me out to race this weekend. He's too fast.
So, Carl, how'd you end up in team ownership? Tell us about how that all came together and where you're at right now with your team.
Well, as being a driver and stuff with it, there was a lot of situations where I was I'd always had a race car, but as I tried to move along and go drive for somebody else, for some reason or another, somebody would come along with some money or something would happen. I'd get kicked out of the seat. And you understand it, it's a business. But what I was doing is I was putting the cars together, driving the haulers to the racetrack, setting them up, driving the race cars, and making them something presentable. And then when I finally got a team that you could run and do something, somebody else would come along and I'd be left out in the cold. So I decided I would start owning my own race car. And if I helped somebody put their stuff together and had a car, at least if they decided to move on and do something different, I was not out in the cold. I still had a race car and I could still go race.
Absolutely.
And, so I had one car, and I've always kept a car or a truck or something that we had built, and I went to an auction and put something together and found it. But as time went on, and that's the building that David is in right now, I did the same thing. I created JGL Racing with a couple of guys, James Whitener and Greg. I just want to brain dead again. Greg, he's Greg Mixon, they all kind of put this thing together. I had 3 cars that I had bought from Penske when they were swapping from Dodges over to Fords. James come in and he bought like 5 of them, and we started in this particular shop that I've got now, and they realized pretty quickly it was going to be outgrown, and they moved on, and they wanted to buy all my equipment and me come just do for them, and I didn't. I had a commitment with Derek White. We had a couple of his cars in there, and the tractor trailer that Derek owned the trailer and I owned the tractor, and we all put everything in a little pile, and so they just had different aspirations than what I did. I learned a long time ago that I wasn't going to lose my security of having a race car, because if I didn't have that race car to go to the racetrack and try to qualify to make the race, I could be out of business. And I've had several other jobs that I gave up to keep racing or doing while I was racing. And I started going full time on my own in 1994 after we'd done won some late model championships and street stock races. We moved up to the All Pro Series, and that's when I went racing full time. And in my rookie year, I won Bristol, which was kind of one of our bigger races. And that race, I had to outrun Mike Cope and David Ruderman and Scott Walters. And David and I ran against each other for rookie of the year, along with another guy that's a shot guy at Roush now named Sean Studer. But David actually won rookie of the year. We had built a different kind of car, and I was really fast at some places and really slow at others.
Well, I got to say, Carl, that NASCAR All Pro late model series, man, dude, that was tough. That was the professional series. That was NASCAR of late model stock car racing in the country, and that was a tough series. And you won the Bristol race in that series.
Yeah, we had, let's see, if I think back on the starting field, it had Rick Crawford in it. It had Ron Hornaday. It had, I think Rich Bickle was in it. A guy's named Freddie Query. I mean, these people, it was Wayne Anderson. Just if you name the who's of late model guys and super lates, they would go run those big races. And like I said, we had a sponsor, a corporate sponsor. It was a televised race, and you're thinking you're going to make it and move up, but sometimes there are people behind you that you think are your friends, and they're helping you, and the whole time they're trying to turn stuff the other way, because if you're winning every week, everybody's your buddy. But when you have bad races and things don't go your way, or something fell off the car, something broke, and you look like crap, man, sometimes that's when you know who your true friends are and who the ones that are supporting you. And I had some that I thought was true friends, and they were just, they kind of set me up for failure. You never hear about the bad side. People talk about a lot. The good side, they don't say much at all. And I had somebody that kind of turned against me and helped open the doors for a new team. And so we wound up losing the sponsorship out of that. And Scott Riggs started driving that car after me, and I quit that and went over to Durham. There was a black man over there named Thee Dixon. I'd known Thee, knew about his racing. He had about 5 or 6 Craftsman trucks, 3 or 4 Cup cars, and your buddy Skinner drove for him for 4 or 5 years. I think Skinner was there for 3 years, and I was there for 5.
Wow.
But Mr. Dixon had a passion to go racing, and today's day it would be great. His nephew Tinsley Hughes is still a good friend of mine, and he will probably find this podcast of yours and become one of your buddies. But but it was a situation I went in, and the people over there, none of them were real racers that he had working for him full time. And I walked in his shop. There was trucks half put together, some kind of scrubbed up, and his shop across the road that he had his Cup car at. Well, there was several Cup cars there, but none of them were really of quality. And all of his parts, he would go to auctions and buy parts, and they were just scattered. And the people that worked for him were painters. He had a lot of Mexican guys that painted for him, and they just threw the shit in a trailer. You know, you go out there and open the door, and there's a storage trailer, and it was full of race parts. I mean, I seen brand new radiators that had a spindle thrown through it, because I guess you got at the back of the door and just tossed the stuff in.
Wow.
And so I straightened all of that stuff out, and I hired a couple of my buddies from Lake Model to come help me, and Mr. Dixon made the payroll. And so the first thing he asked me to do is he had bought this Speedway car, and he's going to go to the Daytona 500, and Randy Renfro was driving it, and his doctor had built the motor. And I'm like,
the doctor?
Yeah. And I asked him, I said, your doctor? He says, yeah, Dr. Skillen, I guess his name was Richard Skillen. And he was a doctor that liked to play in racing a little bit, but he did not build a good restrictor plate motor. So me and Randy Renfro, and that was the first time I had met Randy. I knew him at the track a little, but didn't work with him. So I went with him to the racetrack, and so we had this car at trying to make the 500, and it was slow. It wouldn't keep up. It was a 41 Kodiak car that had sat on a pole the year before.
Wow.
And on the outside pole. I think Steve Grissom drove it.
Steve Grissom, yeah. Wow.
He did not run a lick. And I know why. The water heater on it was not hot. It was just lukewarm, if at most.
Oh, man. Man, Carl, it's amazing to hear your stories and just, and kind of follow your career on how you made it to NASCAR. People have no idea the challenges, the ups and downs, and like you said, winning the Bristol race and the All-Pro NASCAR All-Pro Series. I mean, you think, man, when you do that with all the who's a who of short track racing in the country, that you're on your way, and people don't realize, that just the peaks and valleys and the sacrifices and everything, fighting to stay in this deal, and hearing about your friend here that's giving you another opportunity. Unbelievable, man.
Yeah, there's my first race was in 1983 at South Boston in a Volkswagen Beetle. And so you start adding from that time, and you're a guy that wanted to race. And, I went to the junkyards and got the parts off of the cars, and just learned from the bottom line all the way up of what you had to do. And my biggest thing is I never grew up with money or had any huge resources. So what I had to do was to figure out how you take yourself with no money and put yourself in a position. So I've always been in a position that I had to rely on sponsors, and I had to rely on giving something in order for somebody to give me something that I wanted. And it's like when I worked for the pharmacy in Durham, one of the guys there, he also raced, and he owned it. He was a pharmacist. So I helped him with his race cars, and that's where we hired Jay Riggs, Scott's wife. She came over, and by the time I was moving along and doing stuff, and Romeo Guest Construction had picked me up to help me a little bit, and he had a lot of his subcontractors. And then when we would network at the racetrack, Tony Gurley had a new pharmacy that needed to be built, and Romeo Guest Construction got to do the work, and everybody was happy. I mean, that was, you have to bring something to these people. They don't want to just go spend money on a race car to watch it go around in circles. They want something else to come out of it where they make money. So,
wow.
And
amazing.
Well, and Carl, over the years, you've gotten to run a lot of really cool races across all three national touring series and have had the ownership role for quite a while. Is there still maybe some part of you someday that you might try for a Daytona 500 or try for some more cup races? What does your racing plans look like in the future, especially with those big marquee races?
I'm not real sure. Last year I ran Martinsville because I'd like, when we ran late model races and that stuff, it was one that you really didn't get to run an Xfinity car there. And I ran Martinsville, and I thought I was going to have fun with it, but we missed it a little bit in the shop, and the accelerator wouldn't let all the way off the gas. It was hanging up. So I about burnt the brakes off and couldn't slow the car down too good. So it wasn't a real competitive race for me. And we finished. And at my age now and not doing what David does and sweating it out all of the time, my steering wheel, I think my arms are getting shorter because my steering wheel is getting further away from me. But at least when I put my belts on now, when your steering wheel's right under you and you turn it and your belts come unhooked, you got to realize that, you know, these young kids, I try to tell them they like showing off their abs with their hard six pack. And I tell them I got a keg, you know.
Man, that's funny, Carl. I'm going to brag on you real quick, Carl. I want the listeners to know back when I was racing for Wayne Spears, 2002 up until 2007, 6, whatever it may be, a lot of people don't know that Carl Long was a fabricator mechanic on my truck team when I was winning races in the 75 Spears Chevrolet. The cool thing about Carl Long, Carl would come to work at 7 o'clock in the morning and work on our race trucks. He'd work until about 5 and 6. And Carl would leave our Spears Motorsports race shop, and he would go to his own race shop, and Carl built his own cup cars. Not only did he build his own cup cars, he drove the truck and trailer to the racetrack. He worked on his race cars at the racetrack. He qualified them. He raced them. Then he loaded everything back up and drove his hauler back to his shop. And then on Monday morning came to work at our truck shop. I mean, it's amazing what Carl has done and the desire he has and the passion he has for NASCAR racing. And I want to say back in 2003, 5, 4, I don't remember what year it was, but we were having a truck race at Rockingham, or we were racing somewhere else. I don't remember, but man, I don't think we were at the same racetrack, but man, the big news was Carl Long qualifying his cup car. And I think he was wheeling that thing so hard coming off turn 2, he got into the wall, and man, that thing flipped 1 or 2 times, and that was big news in our sport, man. And it was my buddy Carl Long, you know, and we couldn't believe it. It might even been in the race. I don't remember. Carl, do you remember what I'm talking about? And can you elaborate a little bit more on that? And what year was that?
That would have been 2004.
Okay.
It was the last race that they run Rockingham as a NASCAR track. We had just come back from Daytona, and the truck teams, I think Rockingham was the second race after Daytona before we would go out to the West Coast.
Right.
So it would probably be close to this week or something like that. But anyway, yes, I was racing and didn't have the best funding for tires, and so we had scratched around and got enough scuffed tires, and I'd qualified, made the race, 32nd, 33rd, something, I don't remember exactly, but I had a car that I'd got from Kyle Petty at Petty Enterprises. He had sold one. I'd bought a few things from him from different people over the years, and so this is one that I owned myself. And we were 3/4 of the way through the race, and some of the guys had just come in and made pit stops and had good tires. And if you had good tires at Rockingham, you was 3 to 5 seconds faster than somebody like me with old tires.
3 to 5 seconds. That's a lot per lap.
It was, yes, big. So I went down into turn 1, and the spotter had told me that, you know, I had a couple of them coming in racing side by side. So I got down as low as I could get coming off turn 2. Well, the 2 people were Joe Nemechek and Brendan Gaughan. And I guess Brendan hit Joe in a left rear corner. So as they come off of the corner, Brendan hit Joe, and it turned him sideways, and Joe come down the hill. Well, when he come down the hill, guess what? I'm the guy between him and the infield wall. So he hit me in the right rear, and it turned me right up straight. So the angle that I had went straight into the outside wall on the back stretch, and the car the right front climbed up the wall and flipped over. So I slid all the way down the back straightaway on my driver's window. And that was one of the first years we had the containment headrest. and my A post was dragging the sparks, and they were hitting me in the visor where I had that down, and the asphalt was going by you like 6 inches off the side of your head. Wow. And I knew the asphalt was there, and the car was still sliding, and all I could smell was the gas dumping out of the carburetor, and sparks hit me in the. Wow. I was like, you know, this is a recipe for a barbecue, and I know exactly what to do there. and then it caught grip and started tumbling, and it kept tumbling and tumbling. And I think it went over like 9 times or something like that, 7 or 9. And when it stopped, when the car stopped, it was on its side, but all of our weight's on the left side. And so with the weight being on the left side and the car stopped, it just kind of stalled. And I thought, well, hell, I'm sitting here sideways, and I'm going to get out before somebody hits me or do something. Well, I pulled the steering wheel off with a quick release, and about the time I pulled it off, the car came back down on its wheels, and I took the steering wheel and I bounced it across my legs, thought about hurting myself with that. And I looked, and Bobby Labonte was sliding at me, sliding sideways right at my door, but he kind of stopped before he got there. And I realized I probably ought to stay here until they stopped sliding around me. But it was smoking and stuff carrying on. I wasn't sure if I was going to get on fire. And when I got ready to go out, the halo bar, which is a roll bar, it runs right by your head, it was bent down. Wow. And I hit it like twice and realized, well, that's a small hole there. My helmet just came out that hole between it and the seat rest, and I got the hell out the car. That's what.
Oh, that's great. Let's Go Racing with David Starr, episode number 12, talking to Carl Long. And Carl, we mentioned at the top, you're David's new boss now, his team owner there with your race team. Let's talk about that now. David, you're beginning your 2021 campaign this week at the Daytona Road Course. Carl, I'll start with you. What's your expectation? What's kind of the goals for David and this number 13 team this year?
Well, we know that we don't have as deep a pocketbooks as some of our competition, but I've been very resourceful in having what I would say is an overachiever type equipment for where we're running. And the fact is, it's like David and I said, I went to work. Dave McCarty hired me over there with his truck team back when he drove for Spears, and David and I had raced against each other some. He raced every week, and I was just a few. And so we had a mutual respect, and David won several races with us. And so I know he's got the capability of winning races. I've always respected his ability to drive. And we've got some really good crew chiefs now, all under our wing. I've got Clinton Cram returned. Clinton has been in this thing. I bet he's been crew chiefing for about 15 years. He came down. His brother Kevin has been a crew chief. Buddy Cram has been a big part of racing with Ray Evernham and Dale Earnhardt. We've got Doug Richard working for us full time. Doug Richard was Dale Earnhardt's first crew chief. He was Darrell Waltrip's crew chief. Neil Bonnet, Kenny Irwin, David Pearson, Greg Bickle, if you name it. You know, Doug will probably wind up in the Hall of Fame, and he's kind of our competition director, operating the pull-down machines and things at home. And then we brought Mike Hillman in, or Mark Hillman, Mike's son, brother to Mike Jr. So we brought him in. He's been with the Gaunt Brothers Racing for the last couple of years. And then David's crew chief is Patrick McGee. Patrick had worked as a car chief at Roush Racing for a couple of years. Before that, he had worked with Johnny Davis some. And Patrick is all three of my crew chiefs work as one for each car. And so we've got a really good buffet of knowledge. And I think that I'm looking forward to, he's got Timmy Hill as his one of his teammates. We've got Stephen Light and Chad Fincham kind of sharing duties with the 61 car. And last week, Stephen Light was in the grandstand spotting for Garrett Smithley and spotting for Chad in the Xfinity race. This week, Chad will be in the grandstand spotting for Stephen on the road course. So they all show up each week. We all make it happen. And we've got a few drivers that's going to come in and run our 61 car some that that we really don't have sponsorship for on those weekends. And that is still a partnership deal we have with Shigi Hattori, and their first race will be Pocono, and Austin Hill will be running that car at Pocono. And so we've got what we think is a pretty good set of resources. The engine programs haven't gained a lot since the Cup cars went to fuel injected. The carburetor motors don't really have a lot of research that's been there. It's kind of shared. So even though we've got some engines on our Toyota side that's got a few years of age on them, the knowledge hasn't really gained any. And we feel like that we're in a good spot. We have 42 Toyota engines, 5 Ford engines, and probably 5 Dodges and 6 Chevrolets that we still have sitting around. We've got over 60 chassis at the shop. Now, some of them probably need to be in a scrap yard somewhere, but I just couldn't bear to throw them away right yet. So, but we have 19 complete Xfinity cars, 11 complete Cup cars, and then probably half of that many chassis that we can use to go over. And total amount of people right now, we're about up to, including our engine people, close to 40 people per week employed by MBM.
That's great. That's awesome to see. David, you're going to run 32 races beginning this week at the Daytona Road Course. Where do you think you guys can be strongest at? Where do you think you expect this team to be competitive and have your best shot at getting some of these, good finishes here?
Well, man, Carl Long being my good friend, and just the respect I have for him, and not only as a driver, you've heard. I mean, we could have our podcast for 6 hours and hear Carl's stories, but with the listeners, they kind of get a little bit of a taste of what he's been through. I mean, it wasn't easy. Nobody has ever given him anything, and he made it. He made it to as a professional NASCAR race car driver, and all 3 national series. Now, when I say all 3 national series, trucks, Busch, the Ultimate Winston Cup, the top of the echelon. So it's really cool to work for Carl because, and like y'all just heard what he's talking about, he's been a team owner for a while, and I think every year Carl's team as a whole, as a company, gets stronger and stronger. And last year in 2020, Timmy Hill, I think he finished 5th or 6th at Bristol, and Timmy Hill finished, I don't remember, Carl had to tell us, 2nd, 3rd, or 4th at Daytona. They've had some really 3rd. They've had some really solid runs, and I've always I pay attention. I mean, even though you're busy with your own teams and you racing and your sponsors, you always kind of pay attention to your buddies. And Carl's been what he's been able to do as a team owner with a couple of different his drivers has been very impressive. And when it all worked out, that I was, we had talked about this over the last 4 or 5 years. Maybe me and Carl get together sometime. We always just talk about it, but it never really ever worked out. And when it finally worked out, and I come over here and I've been out of the shop for, I was here for about a week before Daytona, and I'm back here this week before we go back to Daytona to run the road course. I mean, what he was telling you, the people he has, the knowledge he has in his shops, I mean, they have really stepped up their program. So, man, I love to race. Carl loves to race. He's got the right people. I'm looking forward to getting inside to driving his race cars with Whataburger all over them and all of our other partners we have. And, just getting after it. You got a car that handles good, can get in the corner, and it rotates good, and you got good forward drive. I mean, I'm looking forward, if we could be a top 20, top 15 team every week, be consistent, that would be awesome. And it ain't no big news. I was just sharing with Carl a couple of days ago. I said, hey, when you start turning left and right, these road racing stuff, I wouldn't call myself a road racing ringer. It's a little bit challenging when you start turning right. I told Carl, I said, man, he was showing me the car I'm going to run. It's awesome. It's a nice race car. And, it's got a great engine in it. And, man, they've been working on the setup and everything. It's just a beautiful race car. And he said, we're ready for you, man. I said, well, the weakest link that you're going to have there is going to be the guy that's talking to you. And that's me, you know what I mean? But I said, hey, we can go down to Daytona, run the race, keep the race car on the racetrack, run, 10, 12, 15 laps, really get the hang of it, be there at the end and go race somebody at the end. The key thing is to be there at the end. We need to finish this race. And I think it's all going to work out. It's probably not my forte to race on these road racing tracks, but if I can do my job right, we get out there with a great finish and move on to Miami Homestead, then we can start stepping into what my comfort zone, you know what I'm saying? So I'm just looking forward, Carl and his racing team and his people, they know how to treat their sponsors. That's why he's been very successful. He knows how to treat his people, and what he's done as a driver and now a team owner. I'm excited to have all our partners, Waterburger and everybody else that's part of our program. Carl's good with people. He knows how to treat them, and I think we're going to have a good year together.
That's great. That's great to hear. Guys, time for this week's NASCAR news and notes. Dominic, let's look back on that Daytona 500. I thought it was a heck of a race on Sunday, ending on Monday morning there. And ultimately a big upset, one of the biggest ever. Michael McDowell comes home with the Daytona 500 title.
Seems like you get these kind of races once every 10 years. You look back 10 years ago, and Trevor Bayne did this in 2011. Michael Waltrip in 2001 and Derek Cope in 1990 is just some of these recent guys that picked up their first career win in NASCAR's biggest race, NASCAR's Super Bowl, the Great American Race. And Tyler, we were kind of talking off air here, and I kind of want to get Carl and David's take on this. You look at how Michael won the race, and they have road course races, and those just tend to be in his wheelhouse. It seems like McDowell's going to be able to really hold his own, and I think he's going to be placed inside the top 10 in points after the first few events. It looks like he's shaping himself up to have a really good start to 2021.
Go ahead, David. Or go ahead, Carl.
I would definitely agree with you. When we go restrictor plate racing, or it's not plate racing as you call it, but for Daytona and Talladega races, the draft is an equalizer. And if you've got a car that will run in a draft, and I was very proud of the speed that we had in our cars. And if one of our cars would have made the race, it was just as strong. When you come to those races, you can pass the Denny Hamlins, you can pass the big team cars, and they can pass you back. And it's a lot of your working with your spotter and your driver together. So seeing Michael win it, I worked for Front Row and I drove for Front Row years ago. And so I still have a lot of friends over there, and I was proud of them, proud of Bob and those guys being able to put that together. And Michael is a great road course driver. So he put himself to be in the right place, and so those guys, I would say that their loves sponsorship and what they put together with that, which is one of Bob Jenkins's business to business deals that kind of pulled him in there with his trucking company that he's got. That's the future of paying up for your sponsor. They're going to sponsor Bob no matter what. And to have them win the Daytona 500 and all of those guys over there that generally catch the grief like me and David do for being 30th or something, but it's really good for them, and I'm proud of them. And the only thing could have been a lot better if it would have been us, but that didn't happen.
David, what did you make of Michael's win and what the rest of the season looks like for him? He's going to be in the playoffs now.
Man, I think it's wonderful. Michael McDowell is just a great guy, just a great guy, great race car driver. And like Carl was saying, Talladega and Daytona is a great equalizer, and you look at those speedway races and he's always been up there. You can always think Michael McDowell or David Reagan's going to be up there. And it's kind of cool when you see a kind of an underdog guy that's been after it a long time finally win his first race, and that's why we love Talladega and Daytona, because it is a great equalizer. And like Carl was explaining to you, I mean, you take a team that's not one of those powerhouse teams that just, it's got enough money to be there, and every year kind of gets better and better, but you're not competing on a Roger Penske level or a Joe Gibbs level or a Hendrick level. And to see him win that race, it just lets people know, other racing teams, that there is a chance for everyone, and man, I was so happy for Michael McDowell. It was a great race. It was interesting. And like Carl said, I just, during the duels, Timmy Hill and Garrett Smithley had really great race cars. They were fast, and it was cool to see, both of our cars in the duels passing Kyle Busch, passing Denny Hamlin. It was just awesome, and unfortunately, luck didn't work out on our side to make the Daytona 500, but it was just awesome to see Michael Dow come home victorious in the biggest race in our sport. So it was pretty awesome, pretty cool to see it.
Well, and Dominic, to turn things over to you just for a second here, I'm hearing reactions from some fans saying, oh, they didn't think it was that good of a race, too much single file, this and that. I thought it was a great race, great finish. We got to see it come down to the very last lap and everything. I think a lot of the fan reaction just has to do with some angry, salty Chase Elliott fans, maybe.
I don't think you're wrong there, Tyler. I saw a lot of the same comments about being single file, and I know Denny Hamlin had said the same thing. Like, why are we running single file to the last lap? Why were people content running 6th, 7th, 8th, 10th? But it was a great finish. And I think on the flip side of that, too, to kind of play devil's advocate, I saw a lot of fans that were really excited with the fact that Michael McDowell had won. We all love an underdog story. We all love to hear about the stories that don't really get a lot of spotlight. And I think that's what happened here with Michael McDowell. We all know he's a really great super speedway and road course racer, and he was finally able to put together a great race, and he did that in the Daytona 500. And I did think we saw a lot of fans that were really happy with that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
And I want to comment on that if I can.
Go ahead.
And Carl can elaborate on it. Early on in that race, I mean, y'all know the Daytona 500 is exciting. They're 3 wide, they're 2 wide. And I think after the couple of big crashes that happened that, when you're at Talladega and Daytona and man, if somebody messes up, it takes 12, 13, 15 cars out. And I think after they got the racetrack dried late into the next morning, we saw some single file racing. I think everybody just kind of chilled out and they didn't want to get caught up in the crash. So it was just a little bit of conservative on everybody's part to make sure that they were able to go for it at the end. And man, the last 2 laps was really exciting. And I just think that's why the single file racing happened. Nobody wanted to really mix it up too hard because we all saw what happened when we get 2 and 3 wide, So, but anyway, the ending was incredible. What's your thoughts on that, Carl?
I think you hit the nail right on the head. But what I see at the end of the race, and I watched it with ours, is you got to have a partner. And the way that the thing shuffled out, if you were in the outside line, 6th back, okay, it's 6 laps to go. Do I need to make my move now? And you drop down to make your move with 6 laps to go. And the ones that were with you, they said, well, we'll just let him go down there and hang him out. And she dropped to the bottom and fall to the back. Nobody would go with you.
Bubba Wallace tried. Bubba tried to do that, and he fell all the way back.
You saw it.
And so nobody was really going with him. They wouldn't organize the bottom line. And so who's going to jump next? I ain't going to jump. I just seen him move out, and didn't nobody help him. So, but if I knew I had my partner behind me, if I knew that if David was going to move and I was going to go with him, and I knew that somebody was going to go with me, you would do it. But hey, Spotter, who's behind me? Oh, Ross Chastain ain't going with me. So, you know personalities, who's going to stick with you and who won't. And it just lined up that the personalities were not there, and that's why I would have much rather seen them jump down and been 2 wide there for the last 2 or 3 laps. But hey, it wound up still being one where the two teammates that work with each other punted each other. And Michael McGow wins the race.
Yeah.
That's a great point. You move ahead to the Daytona road course now. We're going to stay down in Daytona Beach for another week. And this is the second time that we've run to the Daytona road course. Wasn't even supposed to happen this year, but California couldn't be run. So they're going to run it for the second straight year in a row. Second time in 3 weeks when you consider the Clash was there too. David, I'll start with you. What do you make of this Daytona road course race? And as far as Cup guys go, who are going to be the ones to watch? Seems like Chase Elliott's been on a roll lately when it comes to road racing.
Well, man, just this coming back from Daytona last Wednesday when we were in Daytona, they had the Busch Clash, and man, they ran it on the road course. And man, let me tell you what. Ryan Blaney was unbelievable. Ryan Blaney was great. Chase Elliott was great. I mean, you look at Denny Hamlin. I mean, there was some good hard racing, and it was exciting. And you know, for the people watching that saw the ending of that race, man, people were standing on their feet. Just it was exciting, and I think it's kind of cool. I think the road racetrack at Daytona, their road course is awesome. I mean, if you can run the 24-hour race, the biggest race in the world there, why can't we have a NASCAR race there? So it'll be my first time. I'm looking forward to it. And I can assure you the Xfinity race, the truck race, and the Cup race are going to be exciting. You know what I mean? So I think it's going to be a great weekend of racing, and I'm looking forward to it. And I think we're going to see some good racing.
What do you think, Carl?
Well, Tyler, I think that David has a lot of good points there. And being this is our second time back at that speedway, this car is one that David's driving, is one that we raced there last year. We do have some notes on it. I think we'll be able to help him out with it. And Stephen Light is a companion driver to him, as well as Timmy Hill. And Stephen does very well on road courses. And so they're going to give him a little crash testing on his iRacing simulator tomorrow night. And Stephen told him, he's already told me that what works on the little iRacing game is not quite exactly how it's going to be in live, but you don't realize these iRacing games are so realistic. The curves, the corners, the progression rate that you make into the corners it is very, very spot on for what happens really. So because David has not had any laps on the track, he's going to Stephen Light Tutorial Driving School.
David doesn't do the iRacing, so I'm fascinated to see how this goes. We've been making picks on this show. We started this last week just for the Cup race. We're not going to make David pick his own race he's in. But just go ahead. Let's go around the room. One name. Who's going to win the Cup race Sunday? I'll take the obvious one, Chase Elliott. Dom, who you got?
You took the words right out of my mouth there, Tyler. I got to go Chase Elliott, too. Hey, I picked Brad Keselowski for the 500, and, I mean, it almost happened. So
almost. Dom, who's winning?
Yeah.
David, who's winning Sunday?
Well, watching the Busch Clash there and saying, y'all seen those two guys that were up front and running for the win. I'm gonna have to take Ryan Blaney myself, and hopefully my teammate Timmy Hill will give them a run for their money.
There you go. Carl, who's going to be the guy to beat Sunday?
I just studying. I'm kind of with David. Blaney's been pretty tough, but I'm going to pull somebody out that nobody's thought about that I think is going to do an incredible job, and that's A.J. Allmendinger.
Ooh,
that's a good one.
He's going to be in the 16 car. It's a children's car. It's all out prepared. And if anybody gets around a road course pretty sporty, it's all AJ.
Mm-hmm. And this is his first Cup race with colleague, too. So that'll be cool for him to have that opportunity. We'll be cheering on AJ. I need to get him on the show. Such a likable dude, AJ Allmendinger is. Absolutely. Before we get out of here today, time for our Ask David segment. We ask you to submit questions on Facebook and Twitter at David Starr Podcast on Facebook, Starr Podcast on Twitter, also via email, davidstarpodcast@gmail.com. You can reach us out there. And I got a couple questions that we want to answer that We'll pose these questions to both David and to Carl. And here's the first one. This one comes from Hallie on Twitter, at Hallie Imri. She writes, any superstition with driving a car numbered 13? What do you think, David? Any superstition?
Well, I don't really have any superstitions or believe in that, and didn't even think about it until I was over at the shop last week before we went down to Daytona, and Carl mentioned something about lucky 13 or something, and then I just, I don't know, just, kind of my, I started thinking about that, you know what I mean? But man, no superstitions from my part, it's a cool number. I'm just going to say lucky 13 and roll with it from there. And like y'all heard Carl telling you earlier, I mean, we got some good people here at NBM Motorsports, and if I do my job and everything works out right, that number 13 car is going to be running pretty sporty. So, but I can't wait to hear Carl, because how did he get number 13? And there is a lot of superstitions around that number,
Well, to answer that, the main reason that we have 13 is my partner, Derek White. He's still up in Canada. He's still a part of our race team and program. And that was a number that he wanted us to have from what he was doing. His normal number was 99, and we couldn't get it at that time. And so we went for 13. And I got to looking at it, and, if you Google the unluckiest guy in NASCAR, it comes up with me. So the unluckiest one there can be. So and it's always happened when we would go racing late model races or something, and there'd be a full moon out, and they go, oh hell, everybody's going to crash and wreck and do all that. I'd win the race, and so I figured maybe it's just kind of
reverse psychology.
Absolutely. So if I'm going to be the unluckiest, we're going to be number 13, and if you put both of them two negatives together, it's got to be a great positive.
Absolutely.
Yeah, hopefully not a double negative.
Yeah.
Here's another question. This one's also on Twitter from Jackson Farnsworth, at _real_Farnsey. He writes to David, what's the meaning of life, and how far away are the stars?
Oh man, that's awesome. Hey man, for me, the meaning of life is having a beautiful wife and two beautiful little boys, but before I had all that, man, it was all about racing. The meanings of life to me was being able to get in a race car and race cars, making it, and man, like Carl was sharing with us earlier, the ups and downs and what he went through from time he was 6 years old, back in his dad's race car off the trailer, to being a Winston Cup NASCAR race car driver, now being a team owner. Man, that's what makes David Starr's heartbeat, is climbing inside that race car and racing. You know what I mean? So that's the meaning of life. But look, that changed some when I got older and I met my wife Kim, and then we had two kids. But man, it's besides that, man, it's still that burning desire and that passion inside my body still burns just as hot as the first NASCAR race I ever ran. So that's a great question. I love it, and that's what the meaning of life is to me. Racing cars, having a great family, and having a good time.
But how far away are the stars?
They're pretty close at all. They're pretty close to me, but they're not far away. That's for sure.
All right, Carl, loaded question there. What is the meaning of life, and how far away are the stars?
Well, I don't know if I'm a philosopher quite that way, but I guess the meaning of a life is when you get up and whatever you do during the day or whatever you have is respected, and you go to bed at night and you don't feel like that you had to take advantage of anybody, you had to do anything to try to gain something. It happens on your own. And one of the things that I've always done as a team owner and as a driver owning my team was I just tried to make sure that I paid all of my bills. And my biggest thing now is my passion of racing has grown well enough that I can't do it on my own, and I have other people that I have to depend on. So I do have 4 kids, but now when I look through the shop and stuff like that, I really have 40 people that depend on me. And so it's to get a group together. This is the first time in all of the years that I've been together that I didn't have somebody that left me in January right before Daytona because somebody offered them $50 a week more pay or a plane flight to the track when we had to drive. This year, everyone that was there stayed there. We've got the same people we had last year with the addition of Mark Hillman and Skippy, who's in there with us now. Which Skippy's been with me for 4 years, but now he's full time. He said, like I said, it's trying to take all this in is trying to like drink from a fire hose, and he just can't quite get it all in. So, but that's my meaning of life is just to make sure everybody else is happy. That
okay,
spread that out. And now, how close are you to the stars? I'm real close because I got David Starr right there under my wing now.
That's pretty good right there, man.
I was waiting for that.
Dominic, what's the meaning in life, and how close are you to the stars?
Well, the Starr family is the next state over in Texas. I'm in New Mexico. But the meaning of life, I think, just kind of echoing what David and Carl have said, just you want to wake up in the morning. You want to have that purpose in life. And for me, that's faith, family, and friends. Those 3 things certainly drive me. And of course, we all have our career goals and what we want to accomplish with that stuff too. But I think for me, I've had to realize over the years, no, there is more to life than just building that career. And there is a private life and a public life, and trying to separate those. And I think for me, that's those 3 things: faith, family, and friends. What about you, Tyler?
I have no idea where the stars are at. I think astrology is a bit overrated, to be honest. I don't care about when the moon is red or if it's a full moon or a half moon or anything like that. It's overrated. When we had that eclipse a couple years ago, I'm like, okay, cool, whatever. The moon's going to do its thing. Can't control it. I could care less. So, no, I don't know anything about the stars. As far as the meaning of life goes, if you be kind, work hard, the rest will work itself out. So that's what I live by every single day. I try to, in my job, entertain and inform. If I do those 2 things, then it's going to be successul. So that's why I love
the high school teacher and me coming out saying, where are the stars? The closest star to us is the sun. It's only 93 million miles away. So there's that.
There we go. Man, we're getting education on this podcast now, man. I like that.
Is the sun really hot? Because if you think about it, space is cold. Why is the sun hot then? Wouldn't the sun be hot, be cold?
Great question.
It's fire, right? I mean, the sun's fire. It's a big ball of fire, and Austin Cindric confirmed to us on Twitter this past week, and the fire's hot.
Maybe the Earth just heats itself from its core. There we go. A little spin zone there.
Oh.
Guys, we got to run. This has been a fascinating podcast. We appreciate Carl for joining us. Make sure to subscribe to Let's Go Racing with David Starr. New episodes out each and every week on Apple, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. Also on YouTube, the video version as well. Leave us a 5-star review or don't leave us one at all. Real quick before we run, Carl, what's going on with you this week as you guys get ready for this race weekend?
Well, we're trying to plan the next color schemes and wraps so that our cars are done and ready for Miami and then on to Vegas. And just we have a lot of cars that we had to convert from Camrys to Supras. So we're just trying to get caught up a little bit and then looking forward to having David a good finish up here at the Daytona road course and on to Miami, because after Miami our points and our money is all about what happens after the first 3 races. So Chad's already got David off to a head start, and it wasn't a good one. So we gotta go ahead a little more on it now.
Oh man, David, tell us about your week ahead as you get ready for your debut.
Oh man, just obviously still here at the shop, just looking forward to really just getting one of these MBM Motorsports race cars and representing Whataburger and our other partners we're going to have this year. I just like you're hearing Carl talk about his people. He's got some great people. I'm just excited to get teamed up with everybody and actually go to the racetrack and work with them there. And just exciting weekend, and have Whataburger back on the race car, climbing the window of the number 13 Whataburger Toyota Supra is going to be cool, and hopefully get out of Daytona with a great finish. And man, I've been worried about my wife and my kids and all our friends back in Texas. Here I am, and been in Daytona Beach, Florida, and now in Charlotte, North Carolina, and man, back home in our great state of Texas, man, it's -2 and 3 degrees and snowy, and man, it's just something that's really I've never seen in my lifetime happen in the great state of Texas. But anyway, besides that, just hoping everybody's safe there and gets through everything, and looking forward to getting to Daytona and getting our season kicked off.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Dominic, people certainly need to check out what's going on at racingexperts.com. You guys are full-on season mode now, and you also got a feature on David that's up right now.
Yeah, we always cover the daily news of the sport. We have a really dedicated staff. I got to give a shout out to Jonathan Field, Justin Malillo, to Adam Kuhn, and to Nick Lewis. All those four guys just keep our site rolling along, and they do a really good job. So we also have our social media giveaways. And yeah, we had some news with David that came out of our podcast last week that made the front page of jski.com. Everybody in the industry loves J-Ski. So anytime as a journalist you get your work up on J-Ski's front page, you feel really accomplished. Don't care how old you are. You know that it's getting out there to the masses. So, no, we're just going to keep covering the sport, and we'll be back next week. And, Tyler, that question never gets flipped on you. What do you got going on over the next few days?
Oh, man, it's busy. I'm about to do 5 hours of TV the next 3 days for Local News Live. So, that'll be exciting. Last week, I'm interviewing Alex Bowman. This week, I'm interviewing a U.S. Senator Roger Marshall. So it's one thing to the other, two completely different spectrums. It's all good. Got a new Jones Report that'll be out coming out on a Thursday on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, all that great stuff. So we got to run. We got to put the checkered flag out on this show. We'll see you right back here next week. For Carl Long, Dominic Argon, and David Starr, I'm Tyler Jones saying so long. This has been another edition of Let's Go Racing. We'll see you next week.